Let me take you back to a specific night. It was 2 a.m. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, back against the bed, staring at the wall, not crying, not sleeping, just existing. And I remember thinking, if there's a God up there, he clearly doesn't have a plan for me, so I'm done waiting. That was the night I made a decision. I was going to live completely on my own terms. No faith, no prayer, no religion, no God, just me, my mind, my work, my will. And honestly, for a while, it felt like freedom. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you walk away from God, from faith, from whatever spiritual framework you were raised in. The first few weeks feel incredible. You feel autonomous, like you finally woke up, like you've been sleepwalking through someone else's story, and you just grabbed the pen for the first time. I started working harder, making decisions faster, stopped second-guessing myself, stopped praying, stopped waiting for signs, stopped attributing things to a higher power. I was in control, and control, when you've been anxious your whole life, feels like a drug. But here's where the story gets complicated. 3 months in, something subtle started to shift. Have you ever felt productive but purposeless at the same time? Like you're running hard, legs moving, arms pumping, but you look around and realize you don't actually know where you're going? That's what started happening to me. I was hitting goals, making money, networking, optimizing. But underneath it all, there was this low hum of emptiness, like a refrigerator running in an empty house. You don't notice it at first, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it. I started filling the silence the way most people do. More content, more ambition, more hustle, nights out, substances here and there, relationships that were really just distractions wearing the costume of connection. And what nobody talks about, what nobody puts on their motivational reel, is how isolating it is to live with no framework for meaning. Because here's the psychological reality. The human mind is not built to operate in a moral or spiritual vacuum. Studies in existential psychology, Viktor Frankl, Rollo May, even modern neuroscience, consistently show the same thing. People don't just need pleasure, they need purpose. They need to feel like their life is pointing somewhere, towards something larger than their own appetite. When I removed God from the equation, I didn't remove the need for God. I just created a vacuum that I spent months desperately trying to fill with lesser things. Month 5. This is when things got dark. Not dramatically dark. There was no rock bottom in the Hollywood sense. No car crash, no arrest, no public collapse. Just this quiet erosion, like watching a cliff slowly crumble into the ocean, one piece at a time. Barely noticeable until suddenly you realize how much is already gone. My discipline collapsed. Not overnight, but gradually. Without anything anchoring my why, without a sense that what I did actually mattered in any cosmic or relational sense. The self-discipline I was so proud of just quietly evaporated. The gym fell off. The journaling stopped. I was sleeping until noon. I was reactive instead of intentional. I'd scroll for 2 hours, then feel hollow, then scroll more to numb the hollow. And here's the part that scared me most. I started making decisions almost entirely based on how I felt in the moment. Not values, not vision, just feeling. And feelings, as it turns out, are the worst compass in the world. They shift with the weather, with blood sugar, with the last thing someone said to you. Feelings are data, but they are not directions. I had removed the one thing in my life that gave me an external reference point. Something bigger than my mood. Something that said, this matters, this doesn't, this is who you are, this is who you're becoming. Without it, I was just a man reacting. And reacting is exhausting. The turning point didn't happen in a church. I want to be clear about that. It happened in a conversation. I was talking to an old friend, someone who had been through more suffering than most people experience in a lifetime. Lost a child, lost a business, rebuilt from nothing. And there was this stillness about him. Not peace in the fake Instagram sense. Real, battle-tested, quiet stillness. And at some point I just said it. How do you not lose your mind? How are you not angry at everything? He looked at me for a second and said something I still think about constantly. He said, because I'm not the center of the story. The moment I stopped putting myself at the center, everything got lighter. And I remember feeling almost offended by that, because I had spent the last 6 months doing the exact opposite, putting myself entirely at the center. My goals, my timeline, my comfort, my control, and I was miserable. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that one conversation made me religious. That's not how this works. Real transformation doesn't happen in moments. It happens in the direction you walk after a moment. What it did do was crack something open. And into that crack, something ancient and honest started to pour back in. I started to examine, not blindly accept, but genuinely examine, what I had actually discarded. And what I found was this. What most people who reject God are actually rejecting is religion as performance, the guilt, the hierarchy, the institution, the rules without relationship. And honestly, a lot of that deserves to be rejected. But underneath all of that, beneath the liturgy and the politics and the cultural packaging, there is a core principle that is almost impossible to argue with. The idea that you are not the source of your own life. Think about that for a second. You didn't choose to be born. You didn't design your lungs. You didn't wire your own brain. You did not earn your capacity for consciousness. Every gift you have, intelligence, creativity, resilience, arrived before you even had an opinion about it. When I sat with that honestly, for the first time in months, something shifted, because gratitude became possible again. And without gratitude, you cannot be happy. This isn't spiritual opinion, this is documented psychology. Gratitude activates the prefrontal cortex. It interrupts the default mode network. It pulls you out of the self-referential spiral that is the root of most human suffering. I had spent 6 months without a practice of gratitude, because I had spent 6 months convinced that everything I had earned. And when you believe you earned everything, you feel entitled to more. And entitlement is a prison that looks like a throne. So here's what I actually learned. Not what I was told to believe, what I experienced. First, removing God did not remove the need for something transcendent. It just created a market for cheap substitutes. Hustle culture, hedonism, nihilism, ego. These are all just God-shaped holes filled with something that doesn't fit. Second, discipline without meaning is just self-punishment on a delay. You can force yourself to work hard for a while out of pride or fear, but the only sustainable fuel for long-term discipline is a sense that what you're doing matters, that it connects to something beyond you, that there are stakes. Remove the stakes, remove the meaning, and the discipline collapses quietly, almost politely, like a guest who realized they weren't welcome. Third, surrender is not weakness. This one took the longest to understand, because we live in a culture that tells you control is power, that the more you grip, the safer you are. But control is mostly an illusion. You don't control other people. You don't control the economy, your health, the timing of your losses. What you control is how you respond. And there is profound psychological relief in releasing the parts of life that were never yours to carry. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius built an entire philosophy around it. The dichotomy of control. Know what's yours to manage. Release the rest. That's not passivity, that's precision. Fourth, and this is the one I want you to really sit with, the version of God you rejected might not be the only version that exists. Most of us walked away from a childhood caricature, a demanding, judgmental figure on a throne somewhere, keeping score. But what if God, by whatever name you call it, is less about a being in the sky and more about a source of being that you are always connected to? What if it's less about religion and more about relationship? With yourself, with truth, with the force that holds the universe together and somehow also manages to keep your heart beating without your permission? I can't prove that to you, and I'm not trying to. What I can tell you is that the moment I stopped trying to be the author of my own existence and started thinking of myself as a character in something larger, the weight lifted. I'm not the same person I was on that floor at 2 a.m. Not because I found religion, but because I found orientation, a direction to face, a reference point outside my own anxiety, a reason to be disciplined that went deeper than ambition and ran longer than motivation. The chaos taught me that freedom without foundation is just another kind of prison. The turning point taught me that strength and surrender are not opposites, they're partners. And the lessons taught me that the spiritual questions you're avoiding are usually the exact questions you need to sit with. So if you're in that season right now, questioning everything, feeling that low hum of emptiness even as you perform well, I want you to know something. The questioning is not the problem. The questioning is the beginning. The problem is when we quit the question too early, when we mistake skepticism for wisdom or mistake busyness for meaning. Don't do that. Sit in the question. Look honestly at what you've replaced the sacred with. Ask yourself if those substitutes are actually working. Not just in the short term, but in the depth of your chest, at 2 a.m., when the noise stops. That's the question that changed everything for me. And I think it might for you too. If this conversation stirred something in you, if it hit somewhere real, then you're exactly who this channel is for. Every week, I go deep on topics just like this one, the intersection of faith, psychology, purpose, and real life. Not preachy, not surface level, just honest, thoughtful exploration of the things that actually matter. Hit subscribe, leave a comment below, I genuinely read them. And tell me, where are you in this story right now? Because I promise you, someone else in this community needs to hear your answer. See you in the next one.